So we have some interesting news when it comes to Impact Wrestling's ratings on AXS TV this week, specifically considering the disappointment from last week's post-Hard to Kill episode. It looks like this week things are way back up considering the AEW and Impact Wrestling crossover. Now, this week's episode of Impact Wrestling drew the show's best ratings in nearly 7 weeks. Tuesday night's Impact averaged 186,000 live viewers on AXS TV. That's significantly up from the 147,000 live viewers that tuned in last week to the Hard to Kill Fallout episode. Now, the show drew also a 0.05 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic, which is also significantly up from last week's 0.03 rating. The 0.05 rating matched what Impact drew for its Hard to Kill Go Home show 2 weeks ago. Now, overall, Impact ranked 118th for the night in the cable top 18 to 49 demographic. Last week's episode, which aired, of course, on the eve of President Biden's presidential inauguration, ranked 145th. Now, last week, of course, Impact didn't fare too well in the ratings, but it did feature a very, very newsworthy show. Last week's episode of Impact featured an unadvertised appearance from the likes of AEW's Private Party, the return to Impact of AEW star Matt Hardy, AEW President Tony Khan, and Jerry Lynn also made their presence felt on the show in person. Now, what was the difference between this week and last week? Well, of course, this week, you had all of the fallout of what happened last week with the AEW invasion, if you will. But also, Private Party and Matt Hardy were announced ahead of time for this week's episode of Impact and also appeared in a backstage promo ahead of Private Party challenging the Impact World Tag Team Champions Kyle Anderson and Doc Gallows for those titles at No Surrender on Saturday, February 13. In addition to that, this week's Impact also featured Trey Miguel returning as Impact World Champion Rich Swann, Willie Mack, and Tommy Dreamer's partner in the 8-man tag team match against TNA World Heavyweight Champion Moose, Sami Callihan, Chris Bay, and Ken Shamrock in the main event. Matt Cardona, the former Zack Ryder, also had his second match for Impact, teaming with Josh Alexander to face off against Ace Austin and Madman Fulton on the show. Overall, though, I think the big noteworthy thing coming out of the show this week is that this was Impact's best viewership since the December 8 episode, which was, of course, the episode where AEW World Champion Kenny Omega made his first Impact appearance coming off of that AEW World Championship victory at the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite back in December. So certainly a very promising number for Impact, and it just shows what we were saying last week. When we did the video talking about this last week, because we talk about the Impact ratings most weeks, and again, every time I talk about ratings here on the channel, I always say the same thing, but it's worth repeating that I know ratings aren't as important in 2021 as they were, say, in 1999. Are they as important? No, they're not the be-all and end-all of pro wrestling. Are they still important? Absolutely. They still do have a part to play even in 2021. Why? Because the way that pro wrestling companies make money nowadays is through their television deals. Look at WWE. Of course, WWE this week, it's all been about their WWE Network deal with Peacock. But if you look at their television deals of Raw and SmackDown alone bring in nearly $2.35 billion over the course of 5 years. That's what drives WWE. Look at AEW. Their contract with TNT, when it got extended at the start of last year, that made them profitable in their first year. That doesn't happen in business anyway, let alone pro wrestling business. So ratings are still important because they're important to the television networks and they're important to the advertisers. If your show brings in a lot of viewers, advertisers want to advertise on your product, and the television networks are happy that people are buying time on their show and people are tuning into their network. If it does well in the 18 to 49 demographic, the key demographic, advertisers are happy to advertise their product during the show. The product makes money, the networks makes money, so of course they are still important. Now, are they as important as they were in 1999? Of course they're not. Of course they're not, because there are other ways to consume content in 2021. Of course, there's on-demand viewing, there's DVRing, there's streaming, there's illegal streaming for Impact. You're watching it on Twitch as well. This number doesn't take into account the Twitch numbers, so as always, if you have those Twitch numbers, you can let me know in the comment section below. I'll be fascinated to see what they were. But when we spoke about this last week, because as I mentioned, last week it was very disappointing, wasn't it? It was 147,000 live viewers on average across 2 hours, and there was obviously a variety of reasons as to why people didn't tune in last week. I think probably people were most interested about what was going on in terms of the news and politics at the time. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this was last week on the eve of the inauguration of Joe Biden as President of the United States. People were watching cable news, or people were their distraction, their mindset was elsewhere other than Impact Wrestling or pro wrestling in general. That's been the case for the last 4 years, frankly, as well. You know, cable news has become the ultimate reality show, hasn't it? And it's certainly dominated cable. That's for Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, and even Impact as well. They're no different. But it was disappointing. Of course, you were coming out of Hard to Kill last week. Hard to Kill was an excellent pay-per-view event, certainly a noteworthy event. It had the debut of Matt Cardona at the event. Of course, you had the main event as well, which had Kenny Omega have his first match inside of an Impact Wrestling ring. They wear the Bullet Club gear with Gallows and Anderson. He also pins the Impact World Champion Rich Swann with the One-Winged Angel. It was certainly a significant moment, and I think Impact thought, you know what, despite everything going on in the world of politics at the time, despite Joe Biden's inauguration, despite all the chaos that's been going on in the United States prior to that, I think they thought, look, this AEW Impact relationship has been very successful so far. It has driven viewers to go and view the product, and it has driven viewers, AEW viewers, or people that hadn't viewed Impact in a while, it had driven them to go and check the product out, maybe for the first time, or especially the first time in a long time, and it's been successful in doing that. So I think they thought, you know, we make a big splash at Hard to Kill, we have Kenny Omega have his first match, we have him pin Rich Swann, we keep people guessing, and coming into that post-Hard to Kill episode, lots of people will be watching. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I think we said it last week. You can think about all of the excuses that you would like, but ultimately it's disappointing. And it was disappointing last week when they didn't bring in the number that they would have liked. And not only did the viewership go down, but the rating went down in the key demo. But what I did say last week, and it's proven to be correct here when it comes to the ratings this week, is that I think they set their table nicely with last week's episode. And I felt the reason that maybe last week's episode didn't pull in the viewers that they would have liked is because they didn't really announce a lot ahead of time, especially of significance. That isn't a bad thing. It rewards the viewers that are going to tune in anyway. And if you tuned in anyway last week, you got rewarded with an absolutely fantastic and amazing episode full of unexpected surprises, whether it was Private Party, Matt Hardy, James Storm, Tony Khan, Jerry Lynn, you name it. There was lots of surprises last week and it was a fantastic episode. But as I mentioned at the time, they didn't announce any of that ahead of time, which maybe hurt the ratings there. But the positive looking at that was the following week, which was this past week, we could potentially see a nice rebound because everyone goes, look, I didn't watch Impact last week. Silly me, I should have watched Impact because all of this amazing stuff happened. You never know what's going to happen. I can't miss Impact because if I miss it, I might miss out on some amazing things like happened last week. So I think last week's episode did help this week. I think there was a buzz about Impact over the past 7 days with Matt Hardy's back, Private Party are wrestling in Impact now. Tony Khan was there. The AEW president is now a character on the show. He was there in person. He obviously wasn't this past week, but you've got James Storm back as well. Matt Cardona's now in Impact. There was this buzz again. That things were happening in the Impact world, but also of the Impact and AEW relationship. So that proved to be correct because people that didn't watch last week obviously watched this week, or maybe as well the people in AEW thought, man, we're going to get a lot more AEW on Tuesday nights. If it's not AEW Dark, it's on Impact. So I've got to watch Impact. And I think that was the case this week. And as I mentioned also, they did advertise a lot more things ahead of time. They advertised that Matt Hardy and Private Party were going to be on the show. We knew that Tony Khan was going to be on the show anyway because he referenced it last week that he was going to do a paid advertisement this week. So they'll be very, very happy with that. Very happy with that. Considering that this is, again, the best number that they've done since that Kenny Omega debut episode. And frankly, without hardly any plugs on AEW Dynamite. You have to remember, not only did that show on December 8th do that 221,000 live viewers on AXS TV, that was with a significant plug at the end of the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite where lots of people were watching. That show had Sting's debut on and it had Kenny Omega win the AEW World Championship. And right at the end of the show, you have Don Callis say, tune in Tuesday night, Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, you'll find out more. That's a massive cliffhanger with a bigger audience. Then they so heavily promoted it on social media. I mean, it was driven home so hard, wasn't it, over the course of the next few days. Tuesday, watch Impact on AXS TV. If you can't watch it on AXS TV, watch it on Twitch. Twitch did record numbers that Impact have never done before. It was like something crazy, like quadruple their best ever number. It was insanity. So that was heavily promoted. And this week's episode, frankly, if you want to look at levels of promotion, it was nowhere near promoted as hard as that Kenny Omega debut episode. I mean, it just wasn't. It wasn't. You know, you had obviously the buzz on social media of what happened last week with Matt Hardy and Private Party, but there wasn't huge revelations about it on AEW Dynamite. I mean, there was a couple of mentions, obviously, but nothing to the extent of what happened before with Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley back in December. And they did their best number anyway, despite not that much promotion since that Kenny Omega debut episode. And again, I would be fascinated to see, really fascinated to see what the Twitch numbers were like as well, because a lot of the time, you're not going to have more numbers on Twitch than you have on AXS TV, but they can certainly add to it. They can certainly add to it. So I think this is really, really encouraging. I think it's very encouraging for Impact, and it's kind of like I predicted before last week, in the sense that sometimes nowadays you do have to promote things ahead of time. You do have to announce things, which is frustrating. But if you do have that episode where you don't announce things ahead of time, you do have the surprise element of it. You send your audience a message. You send the audience a message going, look, if you didn't tune in this week and you don't tune in some weeks, you're going to miss stuff. This isn't like Monday Night Raw where you can miss an episode here and there and nothing really happens. This is week to week, different stuff's happening, different people could show up. The great thing about this AEW and Impact Wrestling relationship right now is really we don't know what's going to happen every week. You know, I tune into Impact on Tuesdays and I think, right, who's going to show up this week? Because we don't know. We don't know. My only concern would be, I would probably say coming out of this past week, is that yes, you had a lot of people tune in. Yes, the viewership was up. Yes, the demographic, the ratings were up. My concern probably would be that not a lot really happened this week. Yes, you had the return of Trey Miguel, which I think people would be happy with. But in terms of moving the needle, in terms of that AEW influence, it wasn't as heavy on this week's show. I mean, it just wasn't. Yes, you had Private Party and Matt Hardy in a backstage promo, but that promo lasted, what, a minute, a couple of minutes? You had the Tony Khan paid advertisement, which obviously we did the video on it. I'm a big fan of. I think Tony Khan's really morphing into this sarcastic heel character in Impact, and I think it's fantastic. But I use the analogy, the restaurant analogy, and I've used it before. It's one thing to have a load of people come into your restaurant and eat the food, but if they come into the restaurant, they eat the food and they don't like it, they're not going to come back. And that would be maybe my concern this week. Yes, we saw a huge rise in viewers. Were they people, and we don't really know the true sort of, obviously we know the demographics, but we don't know if they've watched Impact before, if they're just AEW fans. We just don't know that kind of detail or information. But if this was an AEW fan sampling Impact for the first time, I think obviously they would have been treated to a very good show. I thought the show was good. If they were looking specifically for this AEW Impact crossover, this AEW Impact invasion, if you will, they didn't really see that this week. Yes, they saw Matt Hardy and Private Party backstage. Yes, they saw a Tony Khan paid ad, but that was about it. They didn't really see anyone inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, inside of the Impact Zone. They might have been disappointed with that. Maybe they were disappointed in that, because there's no doubt that after the Kenny Omega debut episode, there was a huge drop the next week. There was a huge drop. You had 221,000 live viewers on AXS TV on December 8, and then on December 15, you had 177,000 live viewers. That's a big drop. And you could argue that maybe the fans didn't like what they saw during that episode. Maybe they wanted to see more. Maybe they wanted to see Kenny Omega in person on Impact on AXS TV. I don't know. But the fact that this week's episode did more than that week after the Kenny Omega debut episode, that's pretty significant, I think. It shows that, once again, Impact and AEW have touched a bit of a pulse of what the AEW and Impact Wrestling fans want. I think, realistically, they probably want someone in person in Impact every week. Is that possible? Is that feasible? I don't know. And I think for Impact officials, maybe they have to be slightly concerned in the sense that, I mean, geez, can we only do a good number if we've got, Tony Khan appearing in person every week? Or can we only do a good number if we've got an actual, Matt Hardy or Private Party in the ring? That might be a concern for them. But ultimately, without trying to, put a dampener on it too much, they should be happy. They should be very happy with that, and they should feel, I think, vindicated that maybe last week it just was a factor of outside forces, of things going on in the world, major political events that only happen once every 4 years, or maybe it's just a case of, lots of things going on in the world right now. Maybe they are doing the right thing. And they're still, look, and I mentioned this before as well, even last week, that was a pre-pandemic number for Impact Wrestling. when they were prior to the pandemic, when more people were watching television, when less people had cut the cord. I mean, AXS TV is hard to access, no pun intended anyway, let alone after now a lot of people are getting rid of cable because of the expense or just for a variety of reasons. They're not focused on television. They have to focus on trying to find work, doing whatever, just looking after themselves in this current climate. The fact that Impact are doing numbers that they were doing prior to the pandemic, the fact that they're doing near record numbers. I mean, I know 186,000 isn't a record number, but the 221,000 live viewers was, and 186,000 is right up there for Impact. So they'll be very happy with that. They'll be very, very happy with that. And to the naysayers, obviously, I know it's not the same numbers that Impact TNA was doing when they were on Spike TV. I know it's like a 95% drop from when they were doing 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, even 2 million live viewers on Spike TV. I get it, but they're on AXS TV, and considering that at one point Impact Wrestling was a dead brand, it was on life support. Matt Hardy said it himself, 2016, they were this close to going out of business. The fact that they're doing close to record numbers on AXS TV and they're doing pre-pandemic numbers, it's fine margins and it's small victories, and this certainly is a small victory for Impact, so I think they'll be very, very happy about it. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact Wrestling drawing their best ratings since the Kenny Omega debut back in December? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, all things pro wrestling here on the channel, so be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really just help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.